How's it going today, guys? This is Dan over at Marine. I'd like to go over a few things with you today on boat winterization and making sure that your boat's going to be ready to go for you next spring. So here today we have an inboard, very common type of boat people use for wakeboarding, wake surfing, skiing, things like that. A few real important things to go over on this and what we do here at Marine. So the first thing we're going to do is start your motor and get it good and warm in order to do the oil change. With that, we obviously listen to the motor run, check belts, hoses, make sure there's no fuel leaks, nothing crazy like that going on. If there is, we address it and try to get those things corrected so they don't cause you downtime next season. Along with that, we'll go through and we'll change the oil filter, and then if there's a fuel filter, we'll change that as well. After doing that, we go through and we drain the motor and the exhaust system and full cooling system of any water. With that, we go through and we drain a lot of the debris traps and things like that to make sure they're clear of sand. After we go ahead and do that, we fill the block, exhaust, and the rest of the cooling system with antifreeze just to verify that no water was left behind. If there was, it gets flushed out. On a boat like this, it's really important to make sure if there's a heater or a shower, a lot of these boats have them, that gets purged of any water as well and filled with antifreeze so they don't, otherwise they will crack over winter. So after all that's done with the motor, the next thing we'll do is go through and winterize the ballast bags. So we winterize the pump ends, fill them with antifreeze as well, and then pump it back out to make sure any water, debris, anything like that is cleared out. Finally, we'll go through and grease the steering, any other pivot points we find. And then we'll also go through and clean the boat up. These procedures can be quite messy, so we like to go through and give everything a good wipe down and make sure we don't leave any fingerprints behind, or basically try to make it look like we weren't in there. So here at Marine, we also do 4-stroke outboard winterizations, which is obviously very common up here. So a few different things with the outboard, especially in the 4-stroke world. One of the first things that we'll do is change the gear lube. Very important to change the gear lube on it in case throughout the year any moisture got in there. If that moisture stays in over winter, it can actually break the gear housing. So we drain all the old stuff out, fill it with fresh new gear lube. The next thing we'll do on the 4-stroke is change the oil and filter. Once again, make sure any moisture gets out and replace that old used up oil with fresh oil for the winter. Along with that, it's also important to make sure that these outboards are drained of water, leaving them completely trimmed down in the full tuck position. We also blow air back through them, push any water out, and we'll also put a small amount of antifreeze in there just to ensure that nothing freezes over the winter months. With your fishing boats, the other thing you got to be cautious of is the live well systems. Some live well systems can be very complex and some can be fairly simple. Regardless of your system, any water that's left in can cause hoses, pumps, or both to burst over the winter, and those can be extremely costly repairs. The other thing we do at Marine is we'll disconnect all your batteries, live well, or the outboard motor battery, as well as the trolling motor battery. We also load test them to make sure they're good over the winter months so they don't go dead, and you'll have good batteries ready to rock and roll in the spring. Along with that service, what we'll do in the springtime is you either store with us, either our indoor storage or our shrink wrap outdoor storage. In the springtime, we also go through, start the motor back up, make sure it's all ready to rock and roll, get any of that antifreeze out, run through it real quick, clean it up, and make sure it's ready to rock and roll for you. So another common type of boat that you'll see around is the inboard outboard, the IO style. Similar to the other two boats we covered, but with this one, a couple of the other things you want to make sure you do is, along with change gear lube, just like on the outboard, you also want to make sure you grease the bearings. There's a couple different bearings. The gimbal bearing is very important to make sure it gets greased so it doesn't rust over the winter months. The other thing we'll do is oil and filter change, as well as the fuel filter. Along with the winterizing, we'll stabilize the fuel and then run the motor to get that stabilized fuel up and through the complete fuel system, make sure it doesn't go bad over the winter months. After all that is done, we'll go ahead and drain the block and the exhaust manifold of any water, run antifreeze through the motor to ensure that it's not going to freeze over time, and go ahead and clean it all up, give it a good wipe down, and make sure any sign that we were in there is removed and all the grease and oil is out of the boat.